Lenny Dykstra started his career in 1985. He was a tiny 5'10", 160 pounds, but through a combination of hard work, dedication, obsessive amounts of chewing tobacco, blackmail, and human growth hormone, Dykstra reached the pinnacle of baseball. He was voted most hated player 5 times in a row, appeared in 3 All-Star games, won a Silver Slugger, a World Series, earned over $24 million in salary, became friends with Charlie Sheen, Robert De Niro,
That's
Donald
weird,
Trump,
Gina. First
and
I've heard of
built a
that.
business empire worth $60 million. He also acquired several drug addictions, was investigated by the federal government 3 times, was sued by dozens of business partners,
He seems
to
cool.
multiple cases of sexual assault, grand theft auto, and indecent exposure, spent
Not
years
so
in
cool
solitary
anymore.
confinement, was beat down by prison guards, leaving him
Holy
with
shit.
permanent brain damage, achieved a net worth of negative $30 million,
Holy shit.
threatened to kill an Uber driver, and even scheduled a fight with the Bagel Boss.
Dude, you want to step
Holy
outside?
shit.
You want to step outside?
Yes, the Bagel Boss.
What the fuck? Well, I'm in. What with an intro like that?
Encompasses the life of Lenny Dykstra. It is this play right here. Lenny does not like this call, and despite having enough tobacco to feed a small village, he finds enough space in his mouth to complain to the umpire. Lenny would go on to say that the catcher had been kissing up to the umpire all night, which prompted this to happen.
And there we go.
Ooh, baby.
The bench is cleared, and is usually the case in baseball, free for all.
That's rough. He even has like a +5 to poison because he has so much
Plays like this are the
fucking
reason
tobacco
Lenny
in his
earned the
mouth.
nickname Nails, because,
So
yep,
punching
he
him
is
just
tough
makes
as
it fall
nails.
onto
When
his
he entered
face.
the league, he was short and skinny, 5'9", 160 pounds. He was drafted in the 13th round despite hitting .550 and being one of the best high school players in the country. Lenny would skip college, go directly to the
Exit
pros,
prime, no clout.
and did anything in his power to make it and stay in the majors, even if it meant lying, cheating, and threatening anyone who got in his way. He even claims that he had never read a book until after his career because he thought it would hurt his eyes, making him worse at hitting. So yeah, this guy was really dedicated. Lenny would make it
Nice.
to the majors in
He didn't miss anything.
1985
Books
with the
suck.
New York Mets. This team is famous for being extremely devious. They drank and did drugs all night and still dominated their opponents the next day. But perhaps the most shocking fact about Lenny Dykstra, he rarely partied with the Mets. At this point in his life, he was too dedicated to baseball to do drugs
resub
or
game.
alcohol and knew they would hurt his performance, which is pretty ironic
True,
because by
Teddy.
the end of his career, the opposite was true. He did a bunch of drugs every day because he knew not doing them would hurt his performance. Lenny Dykstra literally thought when it came to baseball, reading was worse for you than drugs.
And he was
Despite
right.
Lenny's eventual dark path into drugs, coming up, he had no experience with them whatsoever. Growing up, he never went to a single dance or party, never had a girlfriend.
Ooh, that
claims to
sounds
have
interesting,
only had
Jake.
one friend growing up because he needed someone to play catch with, and didn't have his first sip of alcohol until he made it to the major leagues. He was intensely dedicated
What
to
a
baseball,
fucking
and it
loser.
paid off. In 1985,
Holy
Lenny
shit.
Dykstra was called up to the major leagues. He was 22 years old, and in his first major league game, Dykstra hit a home run. It was his first major league hit and would be his only home run of the year, but Lenny proved he belonged. He batted leadoff, was known for coming up clutch, was loved by Mets fans, and absolutely hated by Mets opponents because he was an absolute savage on the field. In 1986, Lenny played a key role for the Mets. He was their most valuable player in the NLCS, and with Lenny's help, they won the 1986 World Series.
I've
The Mets
never heard of
helped
this
in a lot
guy.
Other ways too, but yeah, Dykstra didn't hurt. But despite Lenny's above-average play in his first 4 seasons, his manager, Davey Johnson, never once let
Wow.
him become a full-time starter.
That
This is
guy
part of
looks
the
like he
reason
means
Dykstra today
business.
constantly calls Johnson a terrible person and manager every time he gets the chance. According to him, Johnson is an alcoholic who cost the Mets several World Series. And after years of being an above-average player without being awarded a starting position, Dykstra finally
Sounds good,
complained
alien.
enough to get traded to the Phillies. He would play the second half of the 1989 season in Philadelphia, finally getting the chance to become the everyday player he begged for. Unfortunately for Dykstra, he was awful at it. Lenny learned his body really couldn't withstand the grind of a 162-game season. By the end of the year, he only weighed 150 pounds, and knowing that the 1990 season would be the year that determined whether he would get a big contract, be forced to be on the bench.
So when did
or
he
even
start
be out of
pulling his
baseball
cock out?
forever, Lenny knew he had
I don't
to
care
make
about
a
the
change.
baseball shit.
So he did what every other player in the 90s did: steroids. Well, not exactly, because Dykstra was extremely early to the party. During his first season on the juice, he had a legal prescription, and no MLB rule stated you couldn't take it. He literally shot up in the clubhouse in front of everyone legally. When
Nice.
asked how he improved
Good
his
man.
performance, he told a reporter, quote unquote, special vitamins. Lenny was so early to steroids, he didn't even have to hide it. It was legal. He went from this to this in one season, and the results on the field were magnificent. He batted .325,
He's a
led
big
the league
tier
in
2
hits,
no skill.
on-base
Thank you, man.
percentage, and made his first All-Star game. Lenny was rewarded with a 5-year, $13.3 million contract. That offseason, steroids were made illegal in the US and banned by the MLB, but Dykstra didn't care because he learned a very valuable lesson this season. Drugs work, and cheating makes you a lot of money. Dykstra
Doesn't make
would
you
never
taller,
forget
though,
this
Lenny,
lesson and
unfortunately.
still applies it to his life today.
That's rough.
Up until that point, 1990 was the best year of Dykstra's career. 1991 was a total disaster. Lenny made it clear, from this point on, he was no longer the clean, sober player solely dedicated to baseball. He was now an extremely rich, arrogant party animal, and since he was playing better than ever, he had no reason not to be. Until the 1991 season, Lenny lost $76,000 playing poker that offseason, and to make
Nice.
matters worse, he was put on a 1-year probation by the commissioner after the gambling ring he was involved with
Thanks a big
was investigated by
big
the
gift sub
FBI.
Swedish,
In May,
and the
after
gift sub
attending
no
his
skill.
teammate John Kruk's bachelor party, he crashed his car while drunk. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks and missed 2 months of the season. According to Lenny, he would have died in this accident
Thanks,
if it
Dark.
wasn't for steroids. Just another
And I have
reason
no
for
idea.
Lenny to continue his drug use.
I'm not
When he
familiar with
returned
the
to
upcoming
field,
one.
He re-injured his collarbone, which was broken in the car accident, and missed the remainder of the season. The following season, he broke his hand in his first at-bat, which led to his second season in a row riddled with injury. After 2 disappointing seasons, Lenny knew if he wanted to continue getting paid big dollars, he would have to have an elite performance in 1993. So Dykstra thought, why don't I just start blackmailing umpires? And it turns out, this was kind of genius. That season, he paid $500,000 to several private investigators to spy on umpires.
Wow.
According to Lenny, he had dirt on almost every umpire. He knew which ones were gambling on games,
Holy
which
shit.
ones were cheating on their wives, and even says he threatened an umpire who he found out was gay. If an umpire made a questionable call while Lenny was in the box, he would turn around and tell the umpire their deepest, darkest secret. And if Lenny is telling the truth, this was extremely effective. Unsurprisingly, he led the league in walks that season. He also led the league in at-bats, runs, hits, and finished second in MVP voting.
Holy
That season, he
shit.
signed a 4-year, $25 million contract, at the time making him the highest paid Philly in history. Reminding Dykstra once again that if he wanted to be rich and successful, the immoral path of lying and cheating was the best route. At this point, Lenny had more money than he knew what to do with, so he began spending it frequently. Dykstra began using private jets everywhere he went, and he was honestly addicted to them, saying it was the only time he didn't have to use drugs or alcohol because the feeling of being on his own jet was enough of a thrill. But when he wasn't on the jet, you can bet he was using a ton of drugs and alcohol. Lenny said he would pop up to 30 Vicodins before every game, and even thought he would die on the field multiple times because of this habit. During road games, Lenny didn't even stay with the team. Instead, he booked his own suites and hired people to organize large parties in them. So when the game ended, he didn't have to go to the bar. He could just go back to his room and have everything he ever wanted. He began hanging out with people like Mickey Rourke,
Wow.
Donald Trump, and had an extremely close
Mickey
relationship with
Rourke?
Charlie Sheen. Dykstra's spending was so out of control.
Why Mickey
At one point
Rourke?
while he was in Germany, he saw a lady walking her dog. He liked the dog so much, he bet his friend he'd be able to make the lady sell the dog on the spot. After negotiation, he ended up paying her $75,000 for the dog, saying it was well worth it because it was a real German Shepherd from Germany. During this time, he started his own
Okay.
car washes
Holy
in California,
shit.
and believe it or not, they were some of the most successful car washes in the country. He would make the All-Star team in 1994 and 1995, but because of the strike in 94 and injuries in 95, this would basically be the end of Dykstra's playing career. But it really didn't matter much to him because he was making
Easy
more
gift sub,
money
Aaron.
operating car washes anyway. Now that he was retired, he had more time for drugs, parties, and business. He also had more time to commit crimes and fraud with every person he came in contact with. But when Dykstra sold his car wash business, his net worth was around $60 million. However, from that point on, pretty much every decision he makes ended in complete disaster. The first
Oh, I
sign of
can't
Lenny's
believe
post-career
that.
downfall occurred in 1999 when his teenage employee accused him of inappropriately grabbing her. He was charged with
Sounds
sexual
like Lenny.
battery and child annoyance, These charges were later dropped, but based on Dykstra's actions after this really does seem like something he would do. Dykstra would go on to sell his car wash business and made a ton of money doing it. He also got sued by a ton of people who were in the business with him, including his brother, who says Lenny promised him 10% of the company, only to fire him right before selling the car washes. Another business
Classic Lenny, baby! Get pranked.
Games while he was playing in them. Dykstra would move on to his next business of stock trading, co-signed by the famous investor and TV personality Jim Cramer, who called Dykstra quote-unquote one of the great ones when it came to stock trading. Lenny would write
Classic Jim
and charge people $1,000 a year for his stock picks. Lenny and Cramer would constantly brag about how bulletproof Lenny's stock picking record was. It was 445-1. But did Cramer endorse Lenny because he actually knew about investing, or because he was an out-of-control superstar athlete who could bring him attention? Well, Dykstra openly admits to never reading a book, so the chances of him actually mastering the markets are pretty low.
No, he's a smart guy.
Build a reputation of being a stock whiz, leading him to bring in thousands of subscribers and millions of dollars worth of loans from banks. But it turns out Lenny had no idea what he was doing. Most of his picks were copied from another investor who Lenny was friends with, and his strategy of picking stocks was basically to buy a stock and sell it as soon as it made any small gain. And if it dropped in value, basically hold on to it until it went higher than the price he bought it at. And if it never reached the price he bought it at, he would just hold it forever, losing a ton of money, but technically it didn't count as a loss. This strategy likely most of his followers to lose a bunch of money, but since Lenny never sold a stock for less than he bought it at, he was technically 445-1. Around this time, Lenny was filming a reality show about his rich, luxurious life of a business mogul. However, nothing about this quote-unquote reality show was real, because Lenny was broke. Turns out a lot of Lenny's business strategy was basically getting people to loan him a ton of money and never paying them back. From
good plan, though. That's a really good plan.
He was sued 24 times. This includes business partners, family members, jet companies, flight attendants, attorneys, and pretty much anyone who he ever employed. Lenny had been broke for a while and just never acknowledged it. He took private jets everywhere, and when his credit cards were declined, he would just charge the bill to his employees, his mother, and sometimes even the pilots.
How was he not in jail?
After he refused to pay for one of Lenny's flights.
So you're telling me, like, if you have $0 fucking dollars to your name, you can just be like, yeah, but I don't acknowledge it. I don't think so. And then just still go out and like buy and do shit and have people loan you shit? How is that it's fucking crazy.
Bankruptcy in 2009, and the way he did it was extremely illegal and ended up being his biggest downfall. It also exposed a lot of other crimes Dykstra was committing. During bankruptcy, he secretly sold or destroyed around $400,000 worth of possessions. He stopped paying everyone who was working for him, so they either sued or accused him of crimes they had previously been quiet about. His maid, after going weeks without a paycheck, finally pressed charges against Dykstra, saying he forced her to give him oral sex every Saturday.
What?
Charges like this kept popping up. Several escorts accused him of never paying for their services,
and
one even said he stole her credit card. Lenny was also posting ads looking for maids and personal assistants on Craigslist. When they arrived, he would get naked and say he needed a massage. He did this to 6 women and even threatened one with a knife. Lenny's
Jesus Christ!
Including one he bought for $18 million from Wayne Gretzky. These homes were basically unlivable. The flooring was torn up, the toilets were missing, there was no furniture, the houses were filled with empty beer bottles, dog feces.
I definitely say on Twitch, Sue would be where you should start for sure.
Wiring was damaged or removed, and the houses were infested.
There's a lot of people that'll teach you some good stuff, I'd say.
During this time, Dykstra was forced to live in cars and
I totally misread your question.
Dykstra was also scamming high-end car dealerships during this time by providing fake information and claiming credit through fake businesses and other people's identities, leading the dealership to lease him luxury cars he couldn't afford. All this was done while Dykstra was being investigated by the FBI, so finally when they felt they had enough dirt to throw the book at him, they did. In 2011, he was indicted for bankruptcy fraud, obstruction of justice, 4 counts of concealing property, 3 counts of embezzlement, and 4 counts of making false declarations.
What about
this, as well as separate cases
sexual stuff?
Indecent exposure,
there we go.
Grand theft auto, as well as the possession of drugs, which they found in his house when they arrested him. He faced 80 years in prison. For a series of plea deals and no contest, Dykstra was sentenced to 3 years in prison in 2012. Unfortunately for Dykstra, he no longer had his freedom, and unfortunately for us, he wouldn't be able to compete in the scheduled boxing match with Jose Canseco. Instead, Lenny got into a boxing match with prison guards, which, according to him, left him with no teeth and severe brain damage. Dykstra said guards entered his cell and beat him while singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" until he was almost dead. He would later sued the jail for $15 million, saying the beating was not provoked, but he later dropped the suit. Lenny spent most of his sentence in solitary confinement, and when he left prison with no teeth and severe brain damage, he was a prime suspect to commit more crimes, which he has. Since being released, he has been accused of stealing $50,000 worth of jewelry from Charlie Sheen's fiancée. He's charged with making terroristic threats to an Uber
This guy's
driver who
nuts!
said Lenny pulled a gun on him from the back seat, and was charged for drug possession. So we can confidently say that even at the age of 57, Dykstra can still party. More evidence of this came out in 2017 when he and a few women trashed a hotel room and even stole the receptionist's glasses on the way out. Lenny is around $30 million in debt, and his ways of making his money
Not
back
that it matters, apparently. He can still do
Howard Stern,
anything.
Lenny says he gets paid by offering his quote-unquote companionship.
Debt means
to
nothing to
elderly
Lenny.
women. So I'll let you guys read between the lines on this one, but it doesn't sound pretty. But perhaps Lenny's biggest splash in recent years was the scheduled boxing match between him and the Bagel Boss. This was going to be a great redemption story for Lenny. You know, the classic tale of the man who lost everything only to rise from the ashes to beat up another man who literally is under 5 feet tall. Unfortunately, Lenny dropped out of the fight to focus on a lawsuit between
Whose leg is he picking
Dykstra
up?
was replaced by Screech from Saved by the Bell, but on the day of the fight, the Bagel Boss didn't show up. So yeah, that's a little history for you guys. Lenny Dykstra has shown throughout his life that he will do whatever it takes to succeed, even if it means putting himself and others in harm's way. This is a pretty good strategy when it comes to being a good baseball player. It can also be a pretty bad strategy if you want to be a functioning member in society. Say what you want about Lenny's long history of lying, cheating, and stealing on the field and off, he's always been pretty entertaining, and I don't know what crime or publicity stunt Lenny Dykstra will do next, but it probably will be fun to watch. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. Good luck the rest of the way, Nails.
Well, that was a lot more interesting than I thought it would be. That entire story has convinced me that debt is not real. Being in debt means literally nothing.